Hey guys, what's going on? It's Preston here from the Legendarium. Welcome to episode number 4, a double episode of 30-minute author interviews. Here at the Legendarium, we're shining a light on indie publishing. Not only do we hope to interview your favorite author, but we hope you find a new favorite author through this podcast. This week our guest is Sarah Noffke. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy 30 minutes with Sarah Noffke. Welcome to this episode of 30-minute author interviews. This week our guest is Sarah Noffke, and this is she's stopping by for part of her blog tour for her new book, Ren, the Monster Inside the Monster. So thank you for joining us, Sarah. How are you doing today?
Good. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. For those that don't know anything about you or who you are, what you do, why don't you just give us a little bio about you and let everybody know what you do?
Absolutely. I'm the author of 4 series. 3 of those are young adult, and one of them is a new adult. They're fantasy, sci-fi, dystopian. And they all take place in the same book universe, which is a fantasy universe about dream travelers who have the ability to go anywhere and do anything within their dreams, and they all have psychic abilities. And the universe is pretty big, has lots of potentials, and the series are all set in different locations, different societies. So that's what I write about, and it really offers a lot of opportunities. It's a lot of fun to write inside of the Dream Traveler universe.
Right, sounds good. So as you said, you've got it's 4 series out, and they're all in this Dream Traveler world. Where did your idea for dream traveling come from?
Great question. And I say that because it was really funny. I remember the day that I came up with it, and I was like, this is either a horrible idea or it's the best one ever. And I just really didn't know, because as a writer, you stay alone with your ideas for a long time before you introduce them, or at least I do, to other people, you know, so you don't really know. But I've always been really inspired by dreams. I just think that they're mysterious, they're fun. Everybody dreams, you know, and there's so much potential inside of a dream world, because I've always been, my background is actually in psychology, and I was really interested in paranormal psychology when I was growing up and thinking about my career. And I just thought that lucid dreaming was really amazing, that aspects of clairvoyance and premonitions that happen within dreams was, you know, just a really cool potential. And whenever I was creating this series, my first series that was the first part of the book world, I wanted a book universe that was a vehicle that could go many different directions, you know, not really be limited inside of, you know, a very small world. So dreams to me felt like a great way to do that, and something we can all relate to. I mean, there's not just dreams and lucid dreaming. There's nightmares. We all, you know, have had nightmares or night terrors or sleepwalking, and there's so many potentials within dreams. So to me, it felt like the right subject matter for me to talk about. So that's how it came about.
Right. That's actually pretty interesting. So let's go back to your I guess how you got into writing. When did you know you wanted to become a writer?
It's an interesting question, because I don't think there was ever a moment where I was like, I'm going to become a writer. This is what I'm going to do. I was always writing as a child. I remember I would climb up to this treehouse that I had, and I would write poetry and really bad plays and awful short stories. And that was as a kid. And I remember thinking of like my favorite writers and being like, well, I could never do that. And so it was never something that I thought I was going to do. It was just something I did on the side. But once I started in my professional career, I would write on my lunch breaks. And, you know, through different experiences and different life-changing events in my life, I realized I'm always happiest when I write. That's you know, that's my bliss. And so I made the decision that I was going to write a book, and I was going to do it, you know, whether it killed me or not. And thankfully it didn't.
Right.
So and I'm here to have this interview.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of how it happened, and not all at once, but gradually, as things tend to do.
So when you first started writing your first book, did you try to get it published traditionally, or have you always gone the indie route?
No, I absolutely wanted it to be traditional. And this was I wrote the first series in 2012. It did not go to indie publishing until 2014. So I spent a good 2 years looking for an agent and thinking, you know what, if I don't do it traditional, I'm not doing it at all. But I think things were a lot different, and they've evolved so quickly in the indie realm in the last few years. And it used to be a little bit taboo. But my aunt, who writes nonfiction, she actually gave me a book that was by Guy Kawasaki. And it's called Ape. It's author, publisher, and entrepreneur. And I read that, and I thought, you know what? Being an indie author is not so bad. And later on, I realized it's not bad at all. It's amazing, because I was under this delusion that, oh, I get this agent and they're going to do all this work for me, and I don't have to market, and I can just sit back and, watch the money roll in and, not do anything. And I think that was really unrealistic. So once I got educated on the subject, I realized I'm probably better suited for an indie author role, because I like having control over every aspect of my career. And I can really do that as an indie author. Not that there's anything wrong with traditional authors, and not that they don't have a lot of control. I just think that it made a lot more sense once I fully understood how an indie author runs their business, which is really what we're doing.
Do you think you'll ever try to go traditionally published, or do you think you'll always stay indie if you can?
Never say never. I mean, I think there's a ton of advantages. I would love the opportunity to have more mass market appeal. Mm-hmm. And I mean, some of my all-time favorite authors are traditionally published.
Gotcha.
And so right now I'm super content as an indie author. I have quit submitting my books and, finished series to publishing houses or trying to find an agent. But, if an opportunity arises, I think that the advantage would be it opens a lot more doors. You have movie deals, you have, opportunities to be in Barnes & Noble and really reach a lot more readers, which is inevitably what we want.
Right. So growing up, what were your favorite authors growing up, or who were they, or what were your favorite books when you were growing up?
It's funny, because when I was growing up, I was a big nerd, and I actually didn't read a lot of fantasy fiction. It wasn't until I went to college. So growing up, I actually read a lot of Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. I loved poetry. I was really into those guys. And in high school, I really got into Fitzgerald. But I actually read a lot of nonfiction growing up, and a lot of pop psychology, which was really funny. Khalil Gibran, who's an old-time poet. So it's funny, because I didn't actually fall in love with the genre that I write until I got to college. And then, of course, Harry Potter comes out, and that's a big deal. But I really got into Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials, whenever I was in college. And that's when I think it really started for me, when I was like, I really want to write something like this.
So was that the story that made you decide, I'm going to write sci-fi kind of dystopian series?
More or less, yes. I mean, I remember I loved Philip Pullman because he was writing something that was for young adults that wasn't dumbed down. I mean, he puts physics and science and, multi-universe into his books. And I remember thinking, I want to do something like this. And that really inspired me. And then the Hunger Games came out, and the young adult genre really started to surge, and there was more of a market for it than ever before. And so puzzle pieces just kind of fit together, and I thought, this is what I need to be doing. I mean, I'm not as strong as a adult writer, I think. For whatever reason, I just gravitate more towards new adult.
I think it's kind of interesting that the way that you said that he talked about the science and stuff in his books, because you had Jay and Cheney do a little spotlight on or a takeover on your website, and he wrote an article about how come authors are afraid in their young adult stuff to dive into the science of their books and explain why things happen. So I thought that was a very interesting article. He'll be on, I think, later this month. But because of that article on your site, he's actually an author I've recently discovered and started reading. So I kind of like that point, about describing the sciences inside of your books.
That's great. And I just love the opportunity to introduce new authors on my blog and give them a platform to discuss those things, because it is a really interesting topic. And what was really great was right after his article came out, Dan Brown, who wrote Angels and Demons and Da Vinci Code, and is very popular and has, had his books turned into movies. Just right after that article came out, an article came out about how they were going to do more of a young adult children's version of the Da Vinci Code. And I mean, let's say it for what it is. They're going to dumb it down for audiences, because I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Dan Brown's work?
Yeah, I've actually got all of his books in that series. But I have the illustrated editions because I love with those books when he's describing a piece of art or a sculpture or a building, they put the picture in there. So to me, having that just brings a whole new, what do I want to say? It just brings a whole new thing to the book, and it like a whole new life. And so yeah, I'm familiar with them.
And you're right, because I'm super visual, and so I mean, what the point is his books are very complex, and it's great to have those visuals. And he's talking about history, and he's talking about conspiracies, and there's philosophy and science and, art and religion, and they're all, intertwined. But when I read that article, I was like, Dan Brown, what are you doing? And I mean, it's not really him, it's the publishers. Let's be honest. But I mean, I just don't think that we have to do that for young adults or children. I think that it doesn't serve them, and it takes away from the story.
Right.
Add, like you said, some visuals and, some illustrated versions, but we don't have to change the language, because kids are much smarter than we give them credit for a lot of times.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So as we said, you have 4 different series. Do you want to kind of give us a brief explanation on each one, and maybe tell us the best way to read your series or your world? What way you recommend reading them? What order?
Great question. And yes, I will. And I'll keep it brief so that, it all is easily digestible, because it gets a little overwhelming. But my first series, I started with the Lucidites series, and it starts with the book Awoken, and it's about a society of dream travelers, and they're like the government inside of the dream traveler world. They're very complex. They create the laws. They have tons of technology. They protect people, and they recruit a young girl named Roya Stark, who has a deadly mission, and she is told that she's the only person that can face this mission, but that's not necessarily the truth. So there's a lot of conspiracy inside of those books. That one's my most complex series. It's sci-fi fantasy, and like I said, it's got a lot of technology, a lot of science. I didn't dumb it down. I put quantum physics into it, and really try to make it something where the reader felt smarter when they finished it, or at least they wanted, to go look up, string theory. And so that's all about Roya's journey with her team. It's been related to things like Divergent and Hunger Games, because it does have that team aspect. It's got, the government, and we don't know if they're good or bad. My second series is the Reverian series, and it is hardcore dystopian in a way. I would say that it's a lot like the Giver series. The society is very strict. There's dress codes. There's the low population and the high population. And it's about a girl named M. Fuller, and M has not received her psychic ability. And all dream travelers have a psychic ability that comes on around the age of puberty. But there's an epidemic within the Reverian society where children aren't receiving their gifts. And so they are being treated with medical treatments to try to receive those. But not everything's what they seem, and the government that they're relying on is maybe deceiving them. So it's about M's journey, and she's a revolutionary. She really has some wonderful qualities that I tried to put in because it's supposed to speak to young adults. And my third series is the Vagabond Circus series, and it is about the circus. And it's if there were no smoke and mirrors, and what you saw at a circus was real. So all of the performers have real abilities. The acrobats can levitate, and the jugglers have telekinesis, and the person that dances with fire has the ability of pyrokinesis. So it was really a fun fantasy series, but it's really dark. It's probably my darkest series from what my readers have been telling me. And my last series is the Ren series. And Ren is an interesting character. He showed up in the Lucidites series as just this random guy. I didn't know where he came from, but I had a lot of fun writing him. He is a snarky, red-headed Brit who will give you life-saving advice while also criticizing you. And readers loved him, so he has a instructor role through the Lucidite series. Then he pops up again in the Reverian series. Same sort of role. But I had a lot of readers that came to me and said, we want to know what happened to Ren before he came to these societies, and we want his story. So the Ren series follows Ren from childhood all the way through until middle age. And it's just, I call it the evolution of Ren because he is an angry guy. He has amazing powers. He can control people with his mind. He can hypnotize them. He can sense people's thoughts through touch, telepathy linked to touch, and he can have anything he wants. But for him, that has always meant that he was cursed, because if you can have anything you want, how does anything have value? So the series really is the evolution of Ren, and he's not a nice person. He's not a happy person. He sure is entertaining, but that series probably gets the most acclaim just because people love a jerk. I don't know why, but they really do. So they say that they love to hate him. And to answer your other question, I would say reading order. The Vagabond Circus stands on its own, so it can be read first or last. A lot of people love it because it's got a lot of fantasy aspects to it. It's told in third person, and that's my only series that is. And I know some people prefer third person, some people don't. So I would say Vagabond Circus, read at any time. Otherwise, I would say you read the Lucidite series, then the Reverians, and then the Ren series. And the reason for that is that Ren does show up in the first two series, and there's spoilers in the Ren series for the other ones. But you could read the Lucidites and the Reverians out of order. You could read the Reverians and the Lucidites. It doesn't really matter.
Gotcha. Was your Vagabond Circus series inspired any by the Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern?
It wasn't, but oh my gosh, I love that book. I have framed artwork on my office walls. I have quotes from that book on my walls because it is rare to find a book that you just fall into, and the language is just, I mean, it makes you feel drunk. It was so beautiful, and it was such a fresh idea. But I was aware when I started writing the Vagabond Circus series that it was going to be related to Night Circus. So I really tried to set it on its own, and it's quite different. But it actually came about because I took my daughter to the circus last year, and I was looking at her face while she was watching the trapeze act, and the expression just blew me away. And I thought, there's really nothing more captivating than a circus for children. So what if we used a circus as the vehicle to inspire people who had lost magic in their life? And that's really what the Vagabond Circus is about. Making people love again.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
You've mentioned several characters talking about the books, and I know that your books are pretty character-driven. What's your process for developing your characters and pulling people into the story with them?
Good question. And they are super character-driven. I don't create outlines at first. I do after, but the first thing that I do is I create character outlines. And, you know, sometimes these characters come from my real life. Sometimes they're conglomerations of people I know. Or sometimes they're like Ren, and I don't know where they came from. But I do create those character outlines, and then I really allow those characters to tell me where the story goes. So I have a rough outline, but I mean, I've seen writers who are amazing and they have these detailed outlines that tell different acts, and mine are more bullet points because I let the character just tell me where it's going to go. And a lot of times I'm kind of surprised and it throws me for a huge loop and I'm not ready for it.
Right. Do you go through a process trying to come up with their names, or is there something certain you do, or do you just, oh, this name sounds good, and you plug a name in with the character?
There have been the rare characters where I've said, oh, that sounds like the right name for them, but usually not. My main characters, there is hopefully a hidden meaning behind their names. Not in all cases. Sometimes I have side characters and things that it's just that's what name sounded right for them. But Roya, who is the main character in the Lucidites series, her name actually means dream. So I thought that was appropriate for her. And inside of that series, many of the characters have names that relate to their main purpose or their main skill. But you have to know the Bible, or you have to know Native American traditions, or it's not going to be overt. And so that's kind of a fun thing that I do just because I do want it to have meaning. And I did the same thing with the Reverian series, but the readers don't really find out that meaning until later on. And hopefully it just creates, a lot of richness and depth to the books. So to answer your question, I absolutely try to make the names meaningful in most cases.
Is there any character in any of your series that is loosely based on you at all?
Well, it's funny because I think we put ourselves into our characters a lot. I mean, I think it was Shakespeare that said, we're in all of our characters. I don't think that's definitely true for me, but I definitely feel really connected to Roya in the Lucidite series, but she doesn't have a great attitude, so I don't know what that means about me. But a lot of people think that she's kind of grumpy, but she has been signed on for pretty much a deadly task. So I tell readers sometimes when they tell me that, I'm like, well, what would you be doing? Would you be all cheery if you were facing death? I don't think so. Right. She's definitely no Katniss, she's not right. Like standing up for tribute and yeah, I'll do it. But you want to know what's really interesting is people always ask me where I come up with Ren, and it took me a long time to figure out where Ren Lewis came from. And I'm sure this is going to tell more about me than I want people to know, but I think that Ren is actually me. Of all of my characters, he's the most like me because I just tend to be very blunt inside my own head. I have a censor and a filter, which Ren doesn't have. He's my internal dialogue, and apparently people like that.
That's funny. You're doing something right now I haven't seen done often with your right now. It's with the Lucidite series. You're actually doing a reading marathon with that. How is that going? Has it been a success? And do you plan on doing more of that in the future with your series?
Absolutely. And I actually inherited this idea from Casey Hayes. She had done that with her series, and it's on Facebook, and you have readers start with the first book, which is usually free, and every single day they go on and there's discussion posts, and it's a virtual book club. But there's also giveaways, and there's other authors that come in and do takeovers, and each book in a series is split up over 2 weeks. So a trilogy is 6 weeks long. And when I saw Casey do it, I was like, wow, this looks really overwhelming. And then the readers nominated me to do it next. And I thought, oh no, what have I gotten myself into? And it is super overwhelming because it's 6 to 8 posts a day, and I have co-hosts, and we're constantly trying to interact because that creates for happy readers. And readers love it because they get a chance to ask the writer, what were you thinking with this? And, oh, I love this, or I don't understand this. And then they also get prizes, and they get to connect. And too often we read books by ourselves, and then we try to tell our friends, hey, I'm reading this book, and it's like this, and this happened. And it's like telling the dream that you had last night. Nobody's really connecting with it. They don't understand what you're talking about. They weren't there. So it's been really great for readers to have other people that are reading the book in the exact same spot with them, and they can just interact. So it's gone really well, and it's gone so well that I've decided, and this is a bit of an announcement, a secret reveal, if you will, that we are going to keep the group going. And I'm going to rename it Awesome Reading Marathoners. And I'm going to invite, I've already got 6 authors signed up, and they're going to be showcasing their series. So we will have authors come in. The first book in their series will be free for the first part of the marathon, and then they'll be following my exact same format, where every day they come in and they have discussion posts and there's a certain reading schedule, and we're going to keep this going. And any reader that wants to join can, and they can do one marathon and not the other marathon. We'll have about a week or 2 break between them, but it will be a virtual book club on Facebook, and hopefully be a huge success for authors, which is my main goal, but also a way to keep readers engaged and entertained.
That is awesome. So starting out with just, I know right now you're doing the Lucidites series. Are y'all going to do all of your series before you start with other authors?
No, I don't want to wear people out.
Okay.
And also, it is a ton of work. It worked in this instance because I was finishing up writing a book, and then I was going to be taking a break over the summer. But I will have David Etzis, who has, he writes young adult. He has like 19 books out.
Wow.
But yeah, he's a machine. But he's going to be taking over for me after this is over. He starts July 23rd with the Split series, which is amazing. And then after that, I have S.M. Boyce coming up, and then John Hancock. Then I'll take over, and I'll do a slot, and I'm going to do my Reverian series. So we're going to really have a, regular schedule where we're keeping readers entertained, and we're doing lots of, fun, new, different authors, all authors that I would highly recommend.
That is awesome. So are the authors you have planned, are most of them, do they fit into dystopian or sci-fi genre, or are they other genres as well?
Most of them do, because of the readers that the writers that I interact with. They tend to be of that genre. But S.M. Boyce is actually a fantasy writer. And I think that John Hancock, who will be doing a slot after her, he has dystopian, but he also has a lot of sci-fi and horror. And so I think he's going to be pairing up a few of his books to entertain us with. But David S. is definitely, that's a very dystopian series.
Okay. With my opinion, with young adult books, sometimes they all seem to follow the same format. What sets yours apart from what people will find in, your Barnes & Noble and Books A Million?
Ooh, good question. Well, from what the readers have told me, nobody's doing anything like the Dream Traveler series. They don't have a world quite like that. And I keep my books clean because they are young adult. I don't include, sex or anything like that in my books. I have seen that in some other books in Barnes & Noble. To each their own. But what I would say is that I don't try to create characters that are unrealistic. I don't have, characters that are supremely good and fantastic at everything. I try to create characters that are flawed, and the story is about them growing and them learning to love themselves, or them learning to love other people, or coming to terms with their abilities. And many times readers, especially young readers, have told me, I can relate to this character because they're like me. So I'm hoping that really helps readers to connect more with them. And I've gotten, lots of compliments on that, but I've also gotten a lot of criticism because, like I said, I have characters that are kind of whiny at times, but that's a human. And I like to create human characters, ones with lots of flaws.
Do you plan on sticking with young adult, or do you think you might ever dive into a more adult kind of book?
Well, Ren's series is new adult. It's very adult. It has lots and lots of language, and there is some violence and sexuality. And I enjoyed writing that, but I do really enjoy the young adult, and I have another series planned, and I'm going to start writing at the end of the summer, but I think that it's going to stay in the young adult. So each series kind of dictates where it's going to go, and I think that's where I am for right now.
Gotcha. If someone was to go to the computer you use when you research your books, what's maybe the strangest thing they might find you've had to research for one of your books?
Believe me, I've been worried sometimes that, like the CIA is going to knock at my door and be like, this is not okay. What are you up to in there?
That's funny.
Yeah, in my basement office. What am I doing? There's been a lot. And so one of them was how to stab somebody with the most lethal repercussions, quickest death. I have asked Google to tell me how to make a bomb. And I mean, a lot of things like that, like where to shoot a person so that it causes lots of pain but doesn't kill them. So nice. Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing, is that each of my books has a fight scene. There is some violence, things happen to characters, and I pride myself on being as accurate as possible. So
you're probably on some watch list, like no-fly list that you have no idea about.
Oh, I'm sure of it. The thing is that I can always point to a book and I can be like, it's because of that character. I had to. It's there.
Right.
So hopefully I'm safe for now.
That's funny. I believe I read in an interview you did somewhere that you used to your first book, Awoken, in the Lucidite series, was more of a pantster way of writing, but you've kind of gone into kind of a plantster phase. So do you still do mainly planning, or are you also a pantster, or do you combine the two?
I do combine the two, but much less of a pantster than I used to be. I do not even know how the Lucidite series got to be finished, because I started on page 1 and did not really plot anything through 3 books. And that's a huge series. It's easily 325,000 words or something.
Wow.
So, yeah, I don't know how I did it. It was actually like poetic at the end, where I was like, how did that all come together? But there were tons of rewrites. I rewrote that book series for probably a year, and there were lots of holes and things. So I have moved to outlining, but what I usually end up doing is outlining about half to 3/4 of the book, and the ending is always a surprise for me. And so far that works, especially because I know where a series is going to wrap up, but I don't know. I know where it's going to wrap up at the end of book 1 and 2, but I don't know how it's going to end in 3. So that's kind of been my thing. And I think it's just because I get a little antsy. So I get halfway through an outline and I'm like, let's just start this. But I'll outline along the way as well.
So have you ever written any of your characters into a situation that you had to actually stop writing because you didn't know how to get them out of it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think I have. Because you've got so much controls as the writer.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't think of anything, but as soon as this interview is over with, I'm going to be like, oh, wait, there was that really great example.
Right. What's the most difficult thing you come across while writing, and then how do you overcome it?
Oh, man. When I write, I just really stay immersed in a book. And I think more than anything, it's sleep. I don't sleep and I don't eat, and I just become really zombie-like, and I feel really strange. Like, okay, when I was writing the Ren series, I was speaking in a British accent the whole time. So I think, it's not really a big deal. I mean, I don't even think that it answers your question, but it's just that physically, it takes a huge toll on me when I'm writing. And I know afterwards I end up just like falling into a coma for like 2 to 3 days and needing sleep. And my health probably suffers a little bit, but it's only 6 weeks usually. But that's the thing, is I immerse myself into each story as I'm writing.
So when you start a book from start to finish, it takes you about 6 weeks?
On average.
Okay.
I've had some books that took me 2 weeks. That's an anomaly. But I would say 90% of the books that I've written, it's taken me about 6 weeks. On the long end, there were a couple that I didn't want to finish, and so those took me about 8 weeks. But they just own me. They really become, my substance for a while.
Do you read the same genre that you write, or do you read other genres so that way it doesn't affect your writing?
I do read everything. I mean, I have a friend who is a fantastic romance writer, and I'm not a romance kind of reader, but I've read that because I want to know, what does that look like? Am I just being judgmental in my own head, and I've been pleasantly surprised. For the most part, I do stick with young adult fantasy, and that's where I usually am happiest when I'm reading, but I will jump out of it. The only thing I won't read is horror, and that's just because I'm a huge wimp, and I will have nightmares.
So, I thought I read somewhere, so do you teach part-time as well?
I do. I teach online business courses. Before I started as an author, I was actually an academic administrator. And so I had done that for full time for, I guess, like close to 10 years if you add it all up. And I was a faculty member. But then I ended up doing that part time when I had my child and doing it online, which was a perfect modality for me because, I was home with a child. And I still do it. So it's kind of ironic because I teach business writing and human resource management, and then I write young adult fantasy on the side.
Right. If you could write in any author's world, whether it's a published author or an indie author, which world would you love to write in?
I had already said it before, I love Philip Pullman and his Dark Materials. That is just a brilliant world, and he has done some things that I haven't read that series in 10 years, and it still sticks with me. I love it a lot. But, I also love Cassandra Clare, and she wrote The Infernal Devices and The Mortal Instruments, and she has the Bane Chronicles, and that one's all about shadow hunters, and I think that that's a really fun universe, and she's done similar things she did it before I did, so, but she writes all in the same universe with every single series, so readers already have a construct of what's happening. I would love to write in that universe.
Gotcha. Have you had anybody contact you to see if they could write in the world you've created?
I have not. That would be fun.
So there you go, authors. You can write in her world. Just give her a call.
Give me a call, and I would be honored, and I guess that's considered fan fiction at that point.
Yeah. What is something that you're really good at that maybe few people know about?
Okay. So I don't have the time to do it as much as I used to, but I used to be a huge fanatic of rock climbing. And I think I'm still pretty good at it. It's kind of like riding a bike to beat that one down. But I used to love to rock climb, and I was a member at a gym, and I would set up routes outside, and it was an obsession. I went probably 5 to 6 times a week, and I just loved it. And it's a sport, but what a lot of people don't understand is that it's all about problem solving. Each route is this problem, or the rock climber has to solve it. And I had a child, and I kind of got out of it for a while, but it's still probably one of my favorite sports and the one that I'm best at.
Did you ever do the free rock climbing, or were you mainly in gyms doing it indoors?
I did both. I did bouldering, which is where you don't have any ropes on you and you can't go up higher than 10 to 15 feet. 15 is probably way max. But, and then I did belaying, and most of the time I did it in the gym just because you get to relax more. And I lived in Oregon at the time. I'm a member here in Central California, and it's just great. You don't have to worry about the elements. I've had lots of friends that were injured rock climbing outdoors because you just can't trust the ropes. But I have climbed outdoors. It's just, I love the opportunity to walk into a gym and just, tie yourself into the ropes.
Right.
And, when you go outside, you're like, okay, let's take an hour and a half to set up our ropes. And then just hope they work.
Right. That's funny. So I guess back to your writing a little bit. is there a certain scene that's harder for you to write than other types of scenes?
Yes. I always get a little bit of anxiety when I have to write a fight scene. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that I want it to be accurate. So I was just talking to somebody who has a black belt in Hapkido, and he had just read part of the Lucidites series where there's some fight scenes. And I was like, I hope I got that right, because I try to really talk about the movements and how they happen. And fight scenes you also want to have the right kind of pacing with. And with young adult, I think that we're really restricted because I want there to be a fight scene and I want it to be violent and I want it to have tension and suspense. But at the same point, I don't want it to be overly violent, to cause nightmares, any of those things. So it's really about finding a balance. The same thing for me goes with romance scenes. I'm not as scared of those anymore as I used to be when I first started writing, just because I've learned that you got to stay in the scene. You can't pull, out real fast and be like, okay, they kissed and then it's done and then they walk out the door. You need to like really stay in the scene. But it's the same sort of problem as the fight scene is young adults want a kiss scene, but you've got to keep it clean. And that's sometimes difficult because there's all sorts of, ways that you can go a little too far depending on the audience.
Right. In your, in Awoken, there is a pretty, cool Bruce Lee scene. What inspired that scene? And did you have to do a lot of research for the Bruce Lee scenes that you had?
Thank you for bringing that up because it's my favorite scene probably of any of my books. I remember when the idea came to me, I like jumped out of my chair. I was like, yes, this is happening. So the idea came to me because when you're a dream traveler, you can go back into the past and you can witness certain things. You can't go back to, when Christ walked on water. That's just, that's beyond their capacity. But, you could go back and you could study with Bruce Lee, which is what the main character does. And so I really wanted to pull in some of those fantastical elements because why have those abilities if they can't go and, look over Einstein's shoulder? That to me is amazing. Mm-hmm. But to answer your other question, I did so much research, and I remember I would have Bruce Lee movies up on YouTube on one screen, and I'm writing on the other screen, and it felt like hours of that. It probably wasn't, but I watched a lot of Bruce Lee, and I mean that's the thing is, of somebody that you could spend a lot of time with, Bruce Lee is probably tops because that wasn't just an amazing, martial artist, but he had the philosophy right in his head. So I spent a lot of time watching his speeches, and he really knew how to live his life in order to get what he wanted, which I thought was amazing.
When you're writing, what's your least favorite part of the writing process or the publishing process?
Editing, revising. I just cannot. I mean, I get so excited about the writing part. And then I'm like, oh, and now it's over. And now I call it Revisionville. And I mean, one of the reasons is because I write on the treadmill because I'm really quirky. And so my work usually comes out without any punctuation. And there's a lot of misspelling and problems. And so the revisions take me a long time to do. And they're just not as fun. I mean, they're not as fun as the cover design or the actual writing or the marketing part. But they're necessary.
So you write on a treadmill. Did you have to customize your treadmill so you could set up so you could write while you're on the treadmill?
You would think so, but actually no. And I write on the treadmill and also the stationary bike. And I write on my phone under the Notes app. Okay. And it's just a really funny thing that came up because I do have a toddler, but I started writing when she was an infant. And so when she was an infant, I would write during naps, which thankfully they do nap a lot. And I was very strict about, sleep schedules or at night. So there was a lot of time, but as she got older, she of course wasn't sleeping as much. And I'm a full-time mom and faculty member and writer. And so I just found it really difficult to have time where I could write. But I go to the gym every day. It's kind of one of my things I'm obsessed about is, getting in that hour and a half of cardio. So I have childcare there and I don't have childcare otherwise. And I just figured out one day because I was trying to type a note on my phone because an idea had come to me. I was typing on my phone while I was on the treadmill. And I was like, hey, that worked. And so the note just kept going and going and going. And then all of a sudden I'd written an entire chapter for the book. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. That's multitasking.
Wow. So do you actually like physically type, or do you try to use like the voice commands?
No, I text. Yeah, I mean, it's physically typing it out, and I look like the biggest loon. I'm just so sure of it. People that I know at the gym were like, I saw you on the bike. You know, you were quite intense. And, you know, I mean, I don't care. I've never really cared what other people think, but, yeah, so I just type it out and then I email it to myself and it comes across pretty disorganized, but that's why the revision part is, kind of a mess.
Have you ever ended up cheering a scene while you're writing and you're like in a gym or something and people look at you because all of a sudden you've like cheered for yourself for finishing something while you're on the treadmill or bike?
It's like you've been there and you know, because I have. And not only that, but I've laughed out loud and not just once, but like continuously, because I get pretty delighted with myself. Sometimes I'm like, that was a really funny line. And the guy beside me is like, what are you doing? You know, he probably thinks like, you know, I don't know, I'm watching YouTube or something. And so recently, and this has happened multiple times, but recently I was finishing the end of the Ren series. And, you know, this is the end of a series where I've had this character in 9 books. And I really tried to put a bow on the end of my series. And so I was crying. I'll admit it. I was crying. And I'm on the stationary bike and I'm wiping away tears and I am typing out this book. And I'm pretty certain everybody thought like, you know, I was like breaking up with my boyfriend or something like that. And it was a really bad deal. So I get all sorts of looks, but like I said, I've never much cared for appearances. So
have you ever picked up any new fans because they're like, oh, well, I want to read your stuff now?
You mean like when I'm at the gym?
Yeah, when you're at the gym.
Well, I'm really antisocial when I'm actually working out, but I'm notorious for going around and selling my books to strangers. So like, I'll be like, what are you reading? And they'll say, you know, Hunger Games. I'm like, well, that's interesting because I wrote a book. Here's my card. Free book on my website, you know. I go to Subway and I'm like, I bet you like to read. Would you like to grab a free book? And I always think of it as an opportunity to sell my books and not push them. Definitely not push them, but I don't mind selling myself, which, you know, there's nothing better than to get behind your own books, your own work.
Right. So is this a new Ren book? Is this the final Ren book, or will there be one more Ren book after?
I finished it. It's the end of the series, and the question keeps coming, is he going to show up in another series down the road? And the honest answer is, I don't know. Yeah. I never know what that guy's going to do or when he's going to pop up.
That's interesting. So, do you just like trilogies? Is that like 3 books a nice round number for you, or do you think you'll ever have a series that will be more than 3 books?
I've had this discussion with other authors because I know some feel like their series are so complex and there's so much story that they need to stretch it out to 4, and I can really understand that. And there's been different series that I enjoyed that fell into the 4 book or more. Mm-hmm. But for me, I've never felt that was going to be the case. I have 4 series. They're all trilogies. And the reason, because I do like the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I don't watch television very often, but when I do, usually about after 3 seasons, I'm done. And the only time that's ever been different is with a series like Doctor Who, where it's re-energized by a new doctor. But for me, I just feel like after 3 books or 3 seasons, the characters are played out. Not always, but in a lot of ways, it just feels like a regurgitated storyline if it goes on too long. And I don't want to wear people out with my books or my characters.
So I might know the answer to this question, or we just talked about it. What is one tool in your writing process you cannot live without? Is it a treadmill or a stationary bike?
Well, it could be, but And they found now that exercise is linked to creativity. So it's not, a surprise that writing and movement works a lot. But you want to know, I think that actually above the treadmill and the stationary bike is music. I create playlists like a scientist would, make a rocket. I put that much attention into my playlist. And I have playlists for every single one of my series, sometimes for individual books. And they really help me to stay immersed in that book universe because I associate each song with an emotion or a character or a part of the story. And I can even go back to the playlist that I used for the Lucidites, and I can feel like I've just been sunk back into writing that book. It really keeps me grounded with those characters. So I would say my tool is music.
Music, gotcha. With any of your characters, do you have like a dream cast if Hollywood ever bought the rights to any of your books that you would like to see cast as your characters?
Interesting that you say that. I'm not really big into Hollywood, and I don't watch a lot of television, so it's hard for me to say that would be a yes. But in the marathon right now, a game that we've been having a ton of fun with is, this is my version of Roya. Everybody posts their pick. And it's always actresses and things. And we've been doing the same thing for every single one of the main characters in there. And that's been really fun to see. But, sorry to disappoint on this question. I don't know. I just, of course, would love it to become a movie.
Right. It's time for questions from your fans. The first fan question that I got was from Samantha Birchman, and she wants to know, what are you writing next?
Thank you, Samantha. She's in the reading marathon, and she also runs another group that's called Books and Beyond, I think. She's fantastic. And I'm so excited for this question because I'd love to share it here for the first time publicly. So I'm not going to start it until after the summer. It may kill me to wait that long, but I'll be okay. But it's going to be another Dream Traveler trilogy, and I'm pretty certain it's going to be young adult, although I might have to really work to keep it there. But what it's going to be is the Salem witch trials retold. And the witches, or the supposed witches that are being hunted, are actually dream travelers. So we're retelling history. And I think I've always wanted to do a historical fiction. And I've always wanted to take a well-known part of history and retell it in a way that, is different. So, yeah, the supposed witches are dream travelers. And of course they have all these psychic abilities and they're seen as evil and they're being persecuted. And so it's really going to tell the history of dream travelers because later on in my other series, they go underground. And they have lots of laws to try to keep them protected. And a lot of that's going to have come out of being persecuted as witches. So I'm super excited. And why I say that it's going to be hard to keep it young adult is that was our darkest time in history. That was a horrible time and very violent. So I want to do it justice. And that may mean taking it out of the young adult realm. We'll see.
Right. I think that's interesting. I can't wait to read that one when it comes out.
Thank you.
The next couple questions comes from Dorothy Cannon O'Keefe, and she's got a couple of them. She wants to know, do you dream travel in your dreams? And if so, do you remember them?
Ooh, good question, Dorothy. Thank you. She's also a long-term reader who has really rooted for me. And you know what? I did learn the practices, related to lucid dreaming whenever I started to write this book series because it was important and I wanted to master that. And there are many different things that we can do as dreamers to be more lucid. So do I dream travel per se? Not really. But I am very lucid with my dreams. I can control them a lot of times and I can change them. Before when I would have like a nightmare, I would have to wake myself up. But a lot of times now I can say, that's just a nightmare. Let's just move to a different location. And I do it. So it's nice to be able to control your dreams.
She also wants to know, what genre do you read the most?
Young adult fantasy, without a doubt. Love that. Sci-fi too. Soft sci-fi.
Soft sci-fi, okay. And she would also like to know, what is your favorite TV program, and do you have a favorite film?
Good questions. And I've already mentioned Doctor Who is probably my all-time favorite. I just, I don't watch television because it really does deter from my ability to write, or have time to write. But that's one that I will put aside time for no matter what. Favorite movie? I'm also really bad at this. And it's one of those other questions where it's like after I get off the interview, I'm going to be like, oh, there was that one. I love a lot of the classics. I've been watching those with my daughter in order to give her a great education. So The Wizard of Oz, we just watched The Princess Bride, really trying to share the movies that will stick with you for a long time.
Gotcha. You already answered one fan question, but I'll just bring her attention out. It was Jessica Andrews, and she wanted to know if you were going to have another Ren cameo in another book. But you said maybe.
Don't know, but thanks, Jessica.
The next couple questions are from Sheila K. She wants to know, have your students discovered your secret author life yet, or is your secret still a secret?
Good question, Sheila. Thank you. So for a long time, I didn't put it in my bio that I give to them whenever I first introduce myself, but I started doing that. A little bit. It depends on the class. I don't do it in human resource management because I don't think that they care. But my writing class, I started to think about it, and I was like, well, it probably would be of interest for them to know that, I actually have a background besides, my master's degree. So I've been telling them, and it's funny because sometimes they'll be like, oh, I went off and read your book. So they're starting to learn. I'm starting to become more open about it.
That's awesome. She would also like to know, have you used your muse to inspire them, or do you have a teacher muse that speaks to you like your characters do?
My muse is my daughter. She really is. She's, when I started writing, and, there's a lot of different stories that have been inspired by, just an experience with her. But with my students, unfortunately, I don't teach creative writing. I teach business writing. And it's kind of boring, in that way. So it's not very muse driven. I'm more or less teaching them the mechanics, and I'm teaching them all the rules. And it's funny because I have had readers that have students who have read my books, and they're like, you don't follow any of these rules. You have fragments all over your books, and I don't allow them to have fragments. And I'm like, but you have to know the rules to be able to break them.
And then she also wants to know, she says, I know you mentioned that Aiden talks to you often. Is it about his love of music or his inventions or both?
Good question. And it's funny because the reason this came out is because for a long time when I was writing that series, Aiden, who is one of the main characters, he's a scientist. He has a PhD in physics at a very young age. He would wake me up in the middle of the night, and he was always babbling about something, and I would tell my readers that because, it's of interest to them. And I always got out of bed at 3:00 in the morning, and I'd write down whatever Aiden was talking about. But, it was neither. It's usually about his love. And he's a very passionate guy. He's really into music, and he's very passionate about his technology, but he's more passionate about the girl he loves.
Gotcha. And then the other two questions that were left have been answered. It was one of them was from Tommy Ann Du Bois Crow. Wanted to know, have you always wanted to be a writer? Which you mentioned you've been writing for as long as you can remember. And Deanne Carlton wanted to know, when and where do you write or do most of your writing? And sounds like it's a treadmill or a stationary bike.
Yep. At the gym. Thanks, guys, for the questions.
Yep. So we're now going into the legendary ending. The first one is, what songs are currently on your writing playlist?
Good question. I love Gregory Alan Azikov. He writes indie folk music, and he's got a new album coming out, so I've been doing a lot of his stuff. Also Blind Pilot, indie folk. I just love it.
Gotcha. If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, which one of your book characters would you want to be stuck with?
Oh, good question. M. Fuller. No, wait. No. I want to change my mind. I was like, you know what? I want to be with Zuma. Zuma is the main character from the Vagabond Circus series, and she has great combat skills.
If you could be stuck, or if you were stuck in the zombie apocalypse with a character from anything, any media source, comic books, movie, whatever, who would it be?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Why Spider-Man?
I just feel like that would give me lots of options, lots of, outs. That's what you're looking for with a zombie apocalypse. I'm not expecting to last very long, by the way.
If you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
Time machine. There's lots of parts in history that I think would be amazing to see. But I also love the idea of self-pass interaction. And it's an idea from one of my books. But I think I would go back in the past and find myself when I was feeling really low and just be like, hey, everything's going to be amazing. You're going to get through this. And I love the opportunity that later on that may be what actually got me through it.
Gotcha. If you wrote under a pen name, what genre would you write and why?
So I actually did write under a pen name, so I can answer this truthfully. And it was, I wrote memoirs. And it was stories from my childhood, and they were not PC and not very, clean, but they were really funny, and people loved them. And I wrote it under the pen name Anna Voigt.
If you had to pick between Marvel or DC, which one would you choose?
Marvel all day long.
Marvel? All right.
I didn't even want you to finish that. I was like, nope, we're done.
And of course, as we've done with the written interviews, I have to ask, if a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero, what does he say and why is he here?
Thought about going really philosophical with this, but it's a penguin and he's wearing a sombrero. So he's going to say, hola, cerveza, por favor. That's what a penguin wants.
Right. And before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it's for writing or for life, that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Ooh, good one. I guess it could be for writing or for life, but I would just say, whatever it is that you want to do, find a way to do it. The reason I started writing is because I was afraid I was going to die before I got out my music, before I got out the story inside of me. My brother had died suddenly, and that idea really took hold of me. And so now my motto is, don't die with your music in you. Live the life that you're supposed to be living, and don't wait for tomorrow, because there may not be that.
Yeah. I think that's very good advice.
Thank you.
So where can our listeners go if they want to find out about more about you or your books?
I hope they do. They can go to my website. It'll link them to Amazon, give them a shopping cart for autographed books. There's also a free book on there, the first book in the Vagabond Circus series. They can contact me. They can read my blog. Anyways, that is www.sarahnoffke.com. That's SarahNoff as in Frank, KE.com.
Sounds good, and I'll put a link to your website down in the show notes so people can find it easily. Perfect. And thank you for joining us for this edition of 30-Minute Author Interviews.
Thank you. I've had a great time.
Thanks. Well, guys, that's our time. Thank you for joining us for this double episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and please leave a review. It really helps out. And until next time, stay legendary. Oh, screwed that one up. Blooper reel.